Have you noticed such a strange thing that some people experience after hair transplant? That the results initially looked great, really full and thick, up to 1 year, but further down the line, after like 16 months, 20 months, so on, it looks like they lost a little bit of this transplanted hair. It looks like it's a little bit thinner, a little bit see-through. I know I experienced it myself after both of my transplants, the first one and after the second one. Not to mention hundreds of cases seeing online, as well as like people generally messaging me and asking me this kind of question. And to explain this phenomenon, we have to understand the hair growth cycles. Generally speaking, there are three hair growth cycles phases. The anagen phase, which is a growth phase, which occurs something around between 2 and 7 years. So at this stage, the hair is continuously growing for up to 7 years before falling off. Hair then goes into catagen phase, which is the period when it's basically detaching from the root and lasts usually something about 2 weeks or so. At this stage, hair is detached and is not actively growing, but it's still being held like basically with your skin. So this is the stage when it's actually really easy to just pull out your hair, and that's when a lot of people start freaking out. Oh my gosh, I'm losing hair. Like, no, this is just a normal hair cycle. After catagen phase is finished, we're going into telogen phase. Telogen phase, also called the resting phase, is the stage when the hair follicle doesn't actively produce any new hair at all. So it's basically resting. And it usually lasts something about 3 months if we're talking about scalp hair. So this is the stage for the next 3 months when your hair just doesn't grow and it looks like you lost the hair. And after telogen phase is finished, it goes back to,
you guessed it,
anagen phase. So the hair starts growing once again. And if we're talking about scalp hair, once again, gonna be growing again for 2 to 7 years, depending of whether it's miniaturizing through DHT or not. So if you have male pattern baldness, DHT is attacking your hair follicle, the anagen phase will be decreasing, thus growing for less amount of time, but this is topic for another video. As an estimate, about 80% of all the hair follicles on our head are at the same time in an anagen phase, which means the rest of the 20% are either in telogen or catagen phase. So going back to the transplant, when performing the transplant, the surgical trauma itself is basically forcing all the transplanted hairs going to prematurely catagen and then falling to telogen phase. So this is the common shedding phase that we're experiencing after the transplant between week 2 and week 6. And most of the people gonna shed most of the newly transplanted hairs at this stage. After about 3 to 4 months, we start finally seeing new hairs. The transplanted hair starts growing. All of them will enter the anagen phase. Now, if you've been paying attention, you will understand that transplant forced all the hairs from the donor area to go at the same time into catagen, then telogen, and then anagen phase. So all the transplant hairs start to grow at the same time, which is great. And it starts to growing like wild. Up to 12 months, we see all of this 100% of the hairs that survived grew and looks pretty amazing, thick and nice. However, some of the hairs that were previously in the donor area, they might be finishing their anagen phase, so they're supposed to be going into telogen phase, or their anagen phase just started. So some of the follicles after like 1 to 2 years of the transplant, they'll kind of remember, if it makes sense, their previous growth cycle, and they will kind of go back into it. Now, most of people start freaking out at this moment. They think they're losing their transplant. They start, some aggressive medication regimen. Stop. Do not freak out. This is just a normal part of hair growth cycles. And this is how the transplant works. And to be honest, I'm amazed that not many doctors actually talking about it. Educating patients is really important because so many people just freaking out and then they're going to comments,
Rolandas, what's happening to my transplant?
Like, I'm not your doctor, why are you asking me? But don't take my word for it. Let's see what Joe Tillman, that has over 20 years of experience and like seeing thousands and thousands of patients on a daily basis after the transplant, have to say.
That is a great question. And I say it's a great question because it's something I have talked about before. And I started noticing this on some patients probably 15 years ago, when patients would come in and say, hey, Joe, what's going on with my hair transplant? Like it's thinner than it was 6 months ago. And they would be roughly 1.5 years, sometimes 2 years out. It just depends on the patient. The reason why I think this happens for, I think, more patients than we actually have a grasp of is because when all those hairs are transplanted, not all of them have the same growth cycle. All of these hairs are being reset at the same time. and they shed and they come back in and they're back in anagen and they're all growing beautifully, or we hope all of them. And a year later, it's like, wow, look at me on X forum or X social media channel. Wow, and everyone loses their mind. Oh, wow, it looks so great. I'm going to this clinic. And then 6 months to a year later, that same patient comes back and says, what the hell's going on, guys? My hair is thinner. Well, what's going on is all those hairs that have been reset at the same time that did not previously have the same growth cycles to begin with are resetting back to their original growth cycles. Thereby, more will be in telogen than say 6 months prior, and more or less will be in anagen than 6 months prior.
And if you're not convinced yet, let's see what Dr. Arika Bansalfring-Eugenics has to say.
13 to 15 months post-operatively, when the hair enter the phase of anagen desynchronization, then you can see only 80% hair in the anagen phase. So that is called desynchronization. So the reduction in hair volume of the transplanted hair is there by 20 to 30%.
So if you're finding yourself right now at this stage, please do not freak out. This is just a normal part of hair growth cycles. I've experienced it myself. And the good thing is that after a few months, your hair will start grow back. So it's not like it's been lost. It will start to grow back again, and you will again experience this 100% thickness that you once had about like 8, 9, 12 months after your hair transplant. So don't freak out. Make sure you tackle your male pattern baldness with finasteride and minoxidil at least. And let me know in the comments down below if you still have any questions, doubt, or maybe you got your own story to share. And if you're still currently looking actively for a hair transplant clinic, and you just, for the love of God, you cannot decide which one to choose, just check out this video here. Gonna give you a great detail in basically 5 steps how to find the best clinic for you. Stay tuned.